Hello, thank you all. Thank you, Marcin, Conla, Irish Echo, Iona College. I'm Christine Keneally. I am a historian, 19th century Ireland historian. My original research was on the period known as the Great Hunger, which most of you are familiar with. And for about 20 years now, I've been moving to look at abolition in Ireland. And it was through my work on the Great Hunger that I came to know of the great Frederick Douglass. So I'm sure you've all heard of Frederick Douglass, yes? Absolutely, and his time in Ireland. So when I began my research, very few people seemed to know about it, but now more people are aware of him. But as I researched Frederick, I came to see that he was not the only black abolitionist who came from Ireland, who came from America to Ireland. I've identified about 30 of them who visited Ireland between 1790 and 1860. So I have, I think, 4 minutes left to just talk about some of them, just to give you an idea of how remarkable they are. And I see if this technology works. Yes, so there's Frederick Douglass. That's some of my work. The statue you see is actually at my university, Quinnipiac University, and it depicts Frederick Douglass as a 27-year-old man. That's the age he was when he travelled to Ireland, essentially as an exile from the law. He'd run away from enslavement and he was in danger of being captured. So he was persuaded to come to Europe. He arrived in Liverpool, and after a day in Liverpool, he travelled to Ireland. He came to Ireland for 4 days. He was made to feel so welcome, he stayed for 4 months. And he described his time in Ireland as being transformative. And for the first time in his life, he wrote, he felt an equal to other people. So for him, it was a very, very important experience. So the statue depicts him. He's wearing the cloak of Daniel O'Connell. His outstretched right hand is modelled on President Obama's right hand. And in his left hand, he's clutching his narrative, the book he wrote about his early life, which if you haven't read it, I recommend it to you. So I'm not going to talk about Frederick anymore, just to give you a sense of some of the other black abolitionists. This is Equiano, who you may have heard of, one of the first black abolitionists came to Ireland. He came in the 1790s, and he was hosted by the United Irishmen, the men and women who led the rebellion of 1798. And he was a great human rights activist, and he very much was aligned with their politics, so much so that when he returned to England, he literally had to disappear from sight. He went underground. He wrote his narrative. It was published. It was a bestseller. And he wrote about coming to Ireland. And if any of you have a Belfast connection, you'll be very heartened that he wrote he was particularly welcomed in Belfast. And that experience remained with Equiano. He's commemorated in England, but he is not commemorated in Ireland. My next black abolitionist, and this might be of interest to Natalie, is actually an actor, Ira Aldridge. Any of you heard of Ira Aldridge? Born in New York, 1807. Before he was even 20 years old, he'd faced so much prejudice, he decided he had to leave America. He wanted a career on the stage as a Shakespearean actor. So he managed to get to Liverpool, got to London, and he performed. And within a few years, he was performing in Ireland. And he loved Ireland so much, he actually lived in Ireland for a number of years in the 1830s. The first place he performed in Ireland was, of course, Belfast. The year later, he performed in Dublin. 1837, he was performing in Castlebar, in Tuam, tiny little towns in the west of Ireland. And he took to these towns his great rendition of Othello. After 1852, he decided to take his stage performances to Europe, and there he was honoured by every statesman, every politician, every monarch within Europe. In Russia, he was given the honour of being named Chevalier, and unfortunately, he was travelling to Russia 1867, and he died en route. But a great man who brought Shakespeare to the masses. There was nobody that could equal his performances. He's sometimes being called the Paul Robeson of the 19th century. I think he's much more than that, and clearly very happy in Ireland. And then my final black abolitionist is a woman, Raymond, Sarah Parker Raymond. Her family were abolitionists. She was a free black woman, and she was feisty. She was brilliant. As a young woman, she attended the Boston Theatre. She refused to sit in segregated seating. She was thrown out. Literally, her ankle was broken. She sued the theatre, and she won and got massive publicity in the process. She was an abolitionist. She was lecturing as a teenager, and she decided she would go across the Atlantic for a year. And she came to Ireland, where her brother had been a few years earlier, and of course she fell in love with Ireland. But having tasted that sense of freedom and equality, she knew she could not return to America. So she stayed, speaking about the need for equality in America, and in particular on behalf of enslaved women. So she's a very powerful advocate. She decided she would go to university. She's probably the first black woman to actually get a degree in an English university. And then she decided she would emigrate to Italy, where she trained to be a doctor. And she was a doctor in Italy, and then, always doing the unexpected, at the age of 50, she married a much younger Italian man. And she was quite a woman. Into her older age, Frederick Douglass visited, and he wrote so beautifully about being with old friends again. So a remarkable woman. And I'm just going to finish with Frederick Douglass, and I think it's very appropriate in terms of what Jerry was saying before, and in terms of, for me, feeling at times democracy, women's rights, and so much is currently under threat. So I'm good. If I could finish by quoting my great friend Frederick Douglass, who actually stole this phrase from Daniel O'Connell, but he made it his own, so that's okay. And he realized that nothing would change without a struggle. And so he said to an audience in Dublin, the 29th of September, 1845, agitate, agitate, agitate. Thank you.